This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have New York Times bestselling author Marc Cameron here to talk about his new release, Deadline. Welcome, Marc.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marie.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. This book had my little heart pitter-pattering so much of the time. And when it wasn't my heart pitter-pattering, it was my brain exploding, because the way you tell stories and the information you give us is, you just open up new worlds every time. So thank you. Thank you for such a great read.
No, thank you.
Now, can you start listeners off with an overview of what Deadline is about?
Yeah, that's always a fun thing to talk about, because we, by the time I finish a book, I've already written another book. By the time a book comes out, I've written another book and then started another one. So I have to kind of pull my thinking cap on here. But this is, of course, a book in the Arliss Cutter series about a deputy U.S. Marshal, a couple of deputy U.S. Marshals based in Alaska, Arliss Cutter and his partner, Lola Tariki, woman of Cook Island descent, where my wife and I go every year to write and relax a little bit, get away from the cold, like you read about in the book. But this book follows them really on a couple of missions that focus towards the end and come together. But the main character, other than Arliss and Lola, I think, in this book, is the weather, and so which we deal with a lot here in Alaska. Just today, it's 34 degrees outside. There's a little skip of snow this morning. Nice fall weather for us. My oldest son and his wife were out of town, and we were keeping our 5 grandkids last night, which is just a blessing to have them here. But I was talking to my middle grandson, and he was wearing shorts and running shoes and a t-shirt to school. And I was like, "You don't think you need a coat?" "Nah, I'm fine, Papa. I'm fine. I'll run home. You can meet me on the way home." Weather's just a big thing we think about here. And so in the book Deadline, there's the bad guys and bad ladies and the good guys and good ladies, and they all come together in what I hope is just an incredibly intense cold that makes the reader, want to snuggle up in front of a fire with a cup of coffee or cocoa. It's the coldest I've ever been for work. The coldest I've ever been out in for work is 58 below. But I took it a notch below in this book.
I wanted to touch on that just a little briefly, if that's okay. You give us so much in this, and like I said, your brain grows when you read Marc's work, because you give us the reasons why. You paint the picture so very well and fill in all the little details. And I was curious about what was the coldest weather you've been in? And if you can share, I know there's probably parts of your past that you don't always share, sure, given your prior profession, but could you share a little bit about that? Because whether it was getting on a plane and how a plane would function in that type of weather, whether it's how the human body functions, a variety of things, you just gave us so much to really learn.
Yeah, it's really interesting up here. I was with the Marshal Service for 7 years when I moved to Alaska, so pretty new. But I had 6.5, almost 7 years of law enforcement before that, and then 7 years. So I wasn't really new to law enforcement. And we had come from northern Idaho up along the Canadian border. So I knew cold, but I didn't know the kind of intense cold that we have here. And I've always been an outdoor kind of a person. I like hunting and fishing and being out in the woods and just being out with my kids. And as they were growing up, my favorite thing to do with the family was camp or go out and pick berries or, forage for wild plants or whatever, or fish. And I grew up that way. I had a grandfather. In this book also, there's in all the Cutter series, there's a following character, the grandfather named Grumpy. And because Arliss couldn't say grandpa when he was a boy. And so Grumpy, even though he hardly gets a lot of in-person page time. He's in flashbacks and he's referred to a lot. And I had several grandparents who really took me under their wing. We were traveling a lot. I learned to hunt and fish from my paternal grandfather. And so I incorporate them into the story. But then when I moved up here, I had a lot of experience in Texas where I grew up. But the U.S. Marshals, by virtue of what we do, were everywhere across the state. I was part of a tactical tracking unit, which is like a SWAT team, except rural. So we focused on the man tracking side of things, the boots on the ground, following tracks into the woods when somebody was either lost or running. Of course, we really liked the chasing the running. We were out either training or looking for bad guys, men and women, all the time. And the time that I was out in my coldest was on a training mission up north in actually the area where I write about in the White Mountains. And when we drove through Fairbanks, there were 4 of us on that training iteration, and we drove through Fairbanks and it was 58 below on the clock in town. And then incidentally I think I even mentioned this in the book, on your vehicles where Fahrenheit and Celsius come together is 40 below. And that's as low as the thermometer in your car will tell you. If it says minus 40, it could be much, much colder. Your car is just like, I'm out of here. I'm not describing it anymore. So 58 below when we went through town, and we kept driving. And there's the cabins that I write about in the book you have to ski to or whatnot. But there's one up kind of close to the road called the Fred Blixt cabin, Blixt. And it's a Bureau of Land Management cabin. You can drive off the road and get to it. So we had driven in there and we were going to do some snow machining. And instantly that's where I learned how important the thing about wind chill is. When it's 58 below, if you're going even 10 miles an hour, it's 95 below. And the faster you go, worse the wind chill is. And you can come back with, dark lines of frost nip around your face or worse. So all that we learned firsthand and as a team, and then going out periodically with the state troopers, because marshals work hand in glove with the troopers in rural Alaska, and they're experts. They're out there in it all the time. As much as I like to talk and tell stories, when I'm out with an Alaska State Trooper, I shut my mouth and listen because those folks know what they're doing.
There was no way that someone who hadn't walked the walk would have known what you knew. And it was so amazing because, they always talk about that with setting, making it a character. And you really did in every possible way, because there is weather coming. And there's this kind of countdown that the weather is going to get worse. And the way that you brought those storylines together, it was like the final conflict of everyone's dream, because we start to wrap up one thing and then the other thing takes off and we're not done yet. And so that roller coaster ride was absolutely awesome.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, it's something that I've noticed in your work. You draw very strongly from really powerful moral compass characters. And you do it in so many ways. You look at people in different ways. We see people like Cutter, who, like you said, he's got grumpy in his past. He's got all these people who've influenced him. And we see why he has this very strong moral compass. But then you've got other folks who maybe at first glance we would say, no, they don't have a moral compass. Look at the things they've done in their lives. But when it comes to certain things, they still have a compass, and they have certain boundaries that we may or may not expect them to have. And they have levels of humanity that we may or may not expect them to have. Was that just something that came to you just as being a human being, or did your prior career influence that at all? Seeing people interacting, understanding, hey, some people, believe it or not, as bad as it looks, still do have some sort of compass.
Yeah, no doubt. Both of my sons, they were both in law enforcement. I have 3 kids. My daughter was smart enough to go the other route and didn't do what she did at some other things. But both my sons at the beginning followed kind of in my footsteps. All 3 of my kids are much smarter than I am. But my oldest went into the Air Force, actually went to the Air Force Academy, went the OSI route, which is Office of Special Investigations, kind of like NCIS on TV, but for the Air Force. And he did that for a number of years. And then now he's a physician. He's an ophthalmologist, a surgeon. My youngest son was a police officer here in Anchorage for 8 years. And now he's a diplomat with the State Department, the U.S. State Department. So they wisened up. And I mean, I miss every day I was in law enforcement, and I would never, I would encourage people to go into it. It's more than a job, it's a way of life, but it also takes a huge toll. But what it does do while you're there is it gives you, I used to always say thriller writer 101, but really it's just people. It's a people business. And I mentioned earlier that my wife and I go to the South Pacific every year, and there's a saying in Maori, in Cook Island Maori, that I can't remember the first part of it in Maori, but it basically an older man is asking his young student, what's the most important thing in life? And the student says, I don't know, money, whatever. And the older man says, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It means it's the people, it's the people, it's the people. And talking to both my sons as they got involved in law enforcement, dealt with kind of the people that have made bad decisions, really we all came to the conclusion in our own way that we're dealing with people in the worst day of their life. When you interact with them, and you can't really generally judge people by the worst. I wouldn't want to be judged by the worst decision I made, the worst day of my life. So oftentimes when I'm asked on a panel at a conference or whatnot, man, you must have dealt with some really evil people in the world. Yeah, you know what, I have, and I think anybody in law enforcement has. But by and large, out of the 1,000+ people I've arrested, I can count and even this is subjective, count what I would call the evil, soul-crushing, really bad people with few, if any, redeeming qualities on both hands. Most of those 10 or a dozen or maybe 15 people, they were really bad, really, really bad. The kind that I really draw from when I'm writing evil characters. But most of the people, they might have done some really evil things, but they're just people dealing with who knows what. I've kind of taken on the position, especially after writing so many books, that I go through life like a benevolent alien, just looking at the world and, oh, you're cutting me off in traffic. That's what we do here on Earth. Okay, you must have some reason. And man, it keeps my heart down. It's just much easier that way. And so I try to, when I'm writing a character, whether it's the one you're talking about, I feel like I know what you're talking about, or the villains, they've got a past. They've got something that makes them tick. And all of us are the heroes in our own stories, right? And their story is the way they're seeing life. Arliss and Lola are minor characters in their story.
I absolutely loved that, because it is something that we can take from art and pull into our daily lives. Like you said, oh, somebody cut me off, or even the folks who commit crimes that we think are a little heavier. Maybe they embezzled, maybe they did this and they did that. Looking at it in a moment in time versus, excuse the reference, but reading the whole novel versus a few pages out of the novel, right? You were seeing people in those few pages out of the novel of their life. And did that represent them? Was the die cast early on? All of those things that go into it. Everybody's got a story. And I just thought you did that so well and brought all those stories together so well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That said, it's not like I cut people slack. When I'm meeting them I'm kind of a hard-nosed guy when it comes to meeting them on that worst day of their life. Still treat them like a human being, still treat them with courtesy, as long as they treat me with courtesy, but not come at them looking down my nose at them. Even somebody that did something, really bad, I'm going to treat them like a human being. A lot of times we as law enforcement or military or whatever, we as a way to protect our own psyche, we get a kind of a gallows humor, and I do it. I mean, that's the way you protect your own brain from the horrible things you see. But when you let that overtake you and you start to really believe, oh, that guy's a scumbag, that's damaging. It's damaging in the long run. it's also back the other way. Police officers get painted with a really broad brush because the stuff that's shown on YouTube or TikTok or whatever is the bad guys, the bad cops, where really the ones that I've dealt with are some of the finest men and women, and I've dealt with many. So I draw from that as well for the books. Anyway, sorry, long diatribe. I apologize.
That is not a long diatribe, and I think it's important in general, especially why you're so good at what you do in all of the series that you write, is seeing the people, because we all have to see each other. And I think that's where art is so great, is it can help us see other people and understand, a lot of, as I said, even people we perceive as the villains in your book maybe are not exactly villains. Maybe they're people who've been in tough decisions one after another and after another, and they have to keep making tough decisions. And maybe after a while of bad decision making, they fall into a pattern or whatever it is. It's just, it does make you think of people and situations in other ways, which is absolutely awesome. And dovetails into my next question. I understand you like motorcycles. Is this correct?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
There was a little reference in the book. I believe it was a character named Jill, who,
Okay.
and I know it's been a while since you actually wrote the book and then it comes out in the world. So this is a very specific question. I'm hoping you remember because it kind of stuck with me. She makes a reference to what could happen if a turtle gets under your wheel.
Yeah.
And I believe it's Cutter walks away like, I got to remember to ask her about what is this thing about the turtle under the wheel? So because he had to sit with it, I've got to sit with it. And I need to ask you, Mark, was there ever a turtle under the wheel?
I never had one under my wheel, but the first place I worked in the Marshal in the police department, one of my buddies with one of the other detectives with the police department ran over a turtle and laid his bike down, and there's hardly any coming back from that. When your front wheel hits a box tortoise or a turtle, it slides. It was he was fine. He got some road rash, but everybody, anybody that's ridden a motorcycle for very long at all has probably laid the bike down at least once or dropped it or something. I had a pretty good wreck in the middle of the Yukon Territory. Motorhome pulled out in front of me. He was stopped on the side of the road, but he had his blinker on. So I thought, oh, I better wait for him. He's, you got to ride like everybody's on crack and trying to kill you, And so I waited, put both feet down. I was waiting. There was no one else on the road. I mean, this is the middle of the Yukon Territory. And he looked out and he looked right at me. And he was only 50 yards ahead, maybe 40 yards ahead, looked right at me. And I thought, okay, he wants me to go. So I sped up. And as soon as I sped up, he pulled out in front of me. Well, unbeknownst to me, he was having a fight with his wife and he wasn't looking at me. He was looking away from her. And then he just whipped out in front of me. Well, had I been a better rider, maybe I could have saved it, but I ended up laying the bike down on what we call a low side. It means the bike's in front of you. And the bike's tumbling through the side of the road in front of me, which is better than a high side because that means the bike's chasing you down the road, and that's 800 pounds of steel and fuel chasing you. And I'm bouncing down the road, and it wasn't going very fast. I just gotten up to maybe 25, 30 miles an hour. And I'm a ATG, ATT guy, all the gear all the time. And so I was bouncing down the road, and I remember vividly thinking, hey man, this is going to be cool. I'm going to write about this sometime in a Jericho book. So yeah, there's turtles, there's RVs, but that doesn't keep me from riding. And I rode the Alaska Highway with my son several years ago, my youngest son. He was on a Triumph Scrambler and I was on my BMW, and one of the greatest trips of my life. I'll never forget it.
Oh, I can only imagine. The little tastes I've had of Alaska have been absolutely mind-blowing. So I can only imagine how cool that would be to be out on a motorcycle. And again, thanks to you and Jill and even Cutter's Wondering, because we always think about, if you're on any vehicle, oh, watch out for deer or a dog or even a squirrel. But the box turtle, that was new to me. So thank you.
I'm glad you caught that. That makes me happy.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Now, you did mention your other series, and I understand you have some news on the Jericho front. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I had to step away. There's 8 Jericho novels and 2 novellas, and the last one, Active Measures, came out in 2018, I think. I wrote it in 2016. I can't remember. I think it came out in 2018. But then I had to step away when I took over the Jack Ryan novels from Mark Graney for the Tom Clancy estate. And so there's been 8 or 9 years there that we haven't had one. And Kensington and I have just signed a contract for 2 more. And these will come out in hardcover, like the Cutters, where the first ones were all mass market paperback. So the next one will come out. I'm working on it now. The next one comes out in February of 27, I think. Before that, there'll be another Cutter. I've already finished the next Cutter. It's called Backtrack. It's with the publisher now, and much of it happens. In fact, this is probably a good place to break this news. Half of that book is following Grumpy back in 1977 as a sheriff's deputy in Parker County, Texas, before he even moves to Florida. It's the year Arliss was born. And so all the stuff leading up to that. And then the present day half of the book happens on a cruise ship here in Alaska. And it's how those two, I guess I've got a habit of doing this, but 2 stories come together. And there's an overarching bandit that was very young in the early one and then older in the second one. So it's really fun to write, really fun to explore Grumpy. And so next year I'll be on a cruise ship in Holland America cruise ship in August talking about the book. So it'll be great fun.
Oh my goodness, that is absolutely awesome. I cannot wait to see what else is coming. Are you going to have fans coming on to get the
Yeah, so there's Expedia Cruises and Holland America have gotten together and they call it Authors and Anchors. And people can just look up authorsанdanchors.com. And I think mine's the first one. We're doing one in the 2026 because this happens on a cruise ship, a big final thing in Skagway. Again, no spoilers, but it'll be fun. And then I think they're going to do another one the following year, and then also one to Japan for the Jericho, because I mentioned that I'm doing this Jericho right now. I'm getting ready to go on a research trip to Saipan and the Marianas, and also through Tokyo. I love Japan. Anybody that's read the Jericho books knows that I'm very partial to Japanese culture.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to have to just start looking at my travel schedule. Absolutely awesome. Well, for any readers who want to jump in, and there's even some really fun tastes of the Aurora going on in this book. I mean, it really has all of Alaska and then some in it. So absolutely a wonderful read. Again, it is called Deadline, and it is so much fun. Thank you, Mark, for the wonderful read, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.